Liza.
Live peer.
Success.
No way.
All right.
They're streaming.
Brilliant. Welcome everyone to our 23rd Town Hall. We've got a bunch of things to get through today. We'll have an overview of our organizational structure moving into 2019. We'll get a look at what Embark has launched in the past few months with Embark 4.0. A look at a little side project that Yuri has also been tackling, which is a JS version of Status for desktop. And finally, a new program from our community team for anyone who wants to help participate and get engaged with Status. So on that note, we'll get straight into it. Jared?
Hey, yep. You can hear me, right?
Yep.
All right, good stuff. Cool. So a lot of the work that I've been working on since after Prague has been figuring out kind of what our strategic direction should be and how we can make improvements to the overall organization. Some of you probably don't know, but I wasn't actually officially a CEO, so I've now been officially hired by Status to be the CEO. So hooray for me. Anyway, so that's kind of concerning, right? So basically, the top two things that we really need to start focusing on in terms of the organization is sustainability and our white paper promises. And thankfully, a lot of these overlap. When I talk about sustainability, at the moment, we've basically been burning a lot of our capital just for development costs. But they've been a little unfocused and they haven't really been in line with some getting our S&T use cases out there and actually creating some revenue streams for Status, which is really important from like our principles side of things in terms of continuance and also transparency. Yeah, so next slide. So when we're talking about sustainability and our white paper promises, basically we're talking about S&T use cases. So these are the predominant white paper promises that we made. This is network incentivization. That's whether we're doing like light server or messaging or decentralized push notifications incentivization. If we're talking about in-chat app features such as like blocking people until they pay, such as tribute to talk, anti-spam measures, and even having S&T or some kind of token value to even join chat channels in the first place. There's the Teller network, which is essentially a means of exchanging cash, like physical cash, into crypto tokens through what we would call like a peer-to-peer network of quote-unquote tellers. This is similar to local Bitcoins, local Ethereum, and Tether. Then there's the sticker markets, where like basically to convey any kind of emotional state through chat. Stickers are the best way to do that. They're the predominant revenue streams for like a larger instant messaging organization such as Line. So they're really valuable. There's the DApp store, acquisition referral engine, and the point of sales and Status Plasma. Now, the network incentive, so some of these are grayed out, and the Teller network and the point of sale Status Plasma ones are highlighted, and I'll talk about those in a second. But I want to talk about these grayed out ones first. The network incentivization, tribute to talk, sticker market, DApp store, and acquisition referral engine, they're all contingent on the application working really well. So there's no point in really like focusing on them until the application is really well done. Having that said, we have to work on all of these, right? And so like I'm going to be asking everyone in the organization in the upcoming weeks on how we can prioritize those. I'll talk about prioritization a little bit further down the line. So hold on. Yeah, so it's the Teller network. We've been trying to pursue partnerships with Tether and local Ethereum. We haven't made any proposals to them. So there may be the option to work with some other organization to make this happen. What's also really interesting about this is it can be run as a separate business. It doesn't actually need to be within the Status application. Of course, if the application was further along and it was a better user experience, then we can make a much more unified sort of flow that would work really, really well. And the other side is this plasma network. So this is kind of a relatively new thing that I've been kind of helping with out of one of our partnerships with Amigo. There may be an option to actually get commissioned to develop out some plasma stuff for them. It's very early days and it might not even happen. But if it does, it's actually really interesting for us because we can basically create a payment network or a faster way of doing teletransactions and maybe even a point of sales. So Goran's actually got a really good post on the Discuss talking about point of sales, and it's something that has been talked about in the keycard swarms, and it's also really cool. You can imagine like a teller network actually having a kiosk, and they have like a status phone there, which you just sort of tap your hardware wallet on or use a QR code. So that is like something that would be the strongest use case because it would mean Status is actually a real network in terms of the like a peer-to-peer network, but it's a long way off. Now, I talked about the network incentivization. This relies on basically some of the research that we're doing in terms of the actual messaging protocol for some of it. So it's a little unclear whether we should double down on what we've currently got and then try and incentivize that, or if we should take it a little bit slower and actually create a better foundations for this sort of thing. The tribute to talk, anti-spam, and join group thing they're all very similar in terms of what the mechanism is. It's just a bunch of different parameters changes. And it could be actually implemented by the chat relatively easy. I don't think there's really any major blockers on that. The sticker market is exactly the same boat as the tribute to talk stuff. Like it's something we can totally do, maybe even as an extension to see if it's to actually improve the extension features. Now the DApp store is something that is somewhat of a hot topic. I realize this. And it's something that I never actually really agreed with in the first place. But the reason for that is that DApp, there's a couple of reasons actually. Yes, there is some issues with the screen real estate and how you actually divvy that up. Now we can defer that over to the community, which is a great idea, but there's another massive problem we have with that. And one of the problems that we face as Status, and there's a myriad of reasons why this is the case, but we can be banned from the app stores relatively easily, right? And so one of the arguments that I'm making across the board is we need to be treated and classified as a browser as much as possible, because we can defer what actually happens and what the user actually does with the content away from us. So I'm not saying that like curation is bad at all. I'm just saying that Status should not be doing that, and it should exist as part of the Status network. So you can imagine if we do end up doing a DApp store, then it would be better to have that under someone else who's already doing that essentially, and then work with them in terms of how to do, let them figure out how to do curation. And obviously we can work on that partnership to incentivize them to use SNT for doing those sort of curations. There's a huge difference between us doing that versus somebody else doing that if we want to stay in the App Store. So there is State of the Dapps. They're like one of the largest sort of DApp sort of curation listings online, very popular, a lot of traffic. They're great people as well that are behind that. We used to actually work with State of the Dapps to populate our feed. I'm not sure if we do that anymore. I don't think we do, but we can totally re-engage them to do that, and we can work with them on how to best do curation. But what's good about that is we can also defer a lot of the development that's already pretty much exists to that. The acquisition and referral engine. There's no point in even really talking about this until Ethereum is scalable, so let's not worry about it too much. So there's the docs, if you want to look at the SNT utility breakdown that Yesin did. Thanks for doing that. Some of them are duplicates, and but yeah, you can get more of an insights onto that. Thanks. So the other side is like all of those things were grayed out depend on the actual application being essentially a really good user experience. And here's a note that kind of goes down into some of the perspectives or personas that I thought would be the case and what would actually take for me to actually use the application. Basically, we need to start giving people reasons to open the application. At the moment, we're actually kind of repellent. For example, like if you actually use status for very long, it takes increasingly longer and longer to even open the application. Every time you switch the application, you start and it gets killed, you have to enter in your password. You don't have a really good message reliability. So basically, we need to get to a point where it's not just like painless, but it's actually a really good user experience. The next thing that we need to think about is like, how can we actually get people tokens as easily as possible? And now, like we've already talked about the teller network, which would be a super great way. Point of sale systems would also be really cool that allow us to do essentially like a teller network, but like automated. But there's some other ways as well. Like I think actually the lowest friction user experience to do that is like something like credit. So there's Brainbot's trust lines, which might be interesting to do that with. And there's also perhaps circles as well. And of course there's exchanges, but then like exchanges are still quite high friction. Like you have to either sign up to it, have to fill out KYC, and a whole bunch of other things. So basically when we're talking about status, like we want to make sure that they want to open the application. It's super easy for them to use. And it is literally the best way to get tokens. And of course, we also, like opening status right now is quite a lackluster experience. Once you've once you've gone through the onboarding steps, there's nothing to do, right? So we need to think about like onboarding actions, make it very, very clear. But more importantly, we want to start connecting them with people within the community. So you can imagine like ambassadors who like get notified when people want to have like a real person come intro them. We can find like welcome groups. We can show them how to add friends. We can show them how to get tokens really easily. That sort of thing. Next slide. So most of this is like, I realize this is mostly talking about the core application, and we're talking about the sort of developer concerns. And that's because like I've been working with the developers over the past week in getting their feedback and what is actually the sort of priorities and main concerns and issues and that sort of thing. We'll be doing this with the rest of the organization. So we'll also be working with, I'll be working with everybody to figure out what that looks like. But this is just a general concept map of the last two kind of slides kind of put together and composed in a way that actually, well, makes sense to me. But anyway, next slide. From all that feedback from the developers, I kind of compiled that into like a very ad hoc notes. They're very raw. There was also some real general sort of comments. The build system, like our CI, our Jenkins, is continually slowing us down and continually fails. So we need to have like end-to-end builds, and we need to find alternatives to that. Let's try and like streamline that as much as possible. Also, like we don't have really good debugging tools or ways to figure out what problems are. So let's figure that out. Documentation is also a thing that everyone's actually quite a few people gave feedback about. I mean, really, we just have to start making time to write it out and actually come up with application architectures. We do have some support there, but it's not their responsibility, it's our responsibility. So let's make sure that we get this done. We're totally doing open source wrong. I couldn't agree with that more. But for that to happen, we need to make sure it's easier for people to contribute. At the moment, it's not super easy. If we make it easier to contribute, then doing bounties makes a lot of sense. We can't put bounties out there and just frustrate people if they can't even get their build environment going, right? The communication is too complex. Yeah, we're a big organization now. You don't have to follow everything. So I'm not sure how we can best consolidate this, but I mean, we can get rid of emails if chats works really well, but we're not there yet. I have no idea what to do in terms of better monitoring and early warning systems, but yeah, I recognize that's a concern. And the other feedback was this whole reorg around teams. That's going to have some problems because the strengthened bonds, but like the strengthened sort of partitions in those teams along products is going to break cross communication, and it's going to stifle creativity. And I totally agree with that. So here's a proposed solution. And that's just to do swarms again. And when I say swarms, basically it's still teams, it's just with a different name. So everything that we just did in terms of reorging into different teams is going to stay. But you can just imagine these as being like long form swarms. So the reason we're doing this is because conceptually it allows you to create other swarms that are for very specific use cases. So for example, everyone will, in the development side, will be in these particular swarm groups, I believe. If this is wrong or there needs to be any changes, let me know. I actually got this idea from Igor, so you can blame him. He already started putting together an idea for the core team, and that's 131. But what's actually really good about this is it allows us to formalize some of the things that we, or actually formalize and document what we're actually doing. I'd like to change the framework around a little bit and actually make it so it's explicit steps: research, specification, implementation, and doing postmortem. We don't need to worry about like accountability in terms of teams, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this is important that, okay, you're accountable to these parts of the product, but if there is a need to, like, say, have cross communication between core and browser or core and chat or anything like that, we can create more swarms to handle that. It's also important, like, you only have to use this if it's useful. If you're just one person, you're fixing a bug, it's not necessary. If it's gonna weigh you down, it's a problem. That's not an invitation for you to go off and do things and not document them. But I recognize that it's not needed for everything. Basically the desktop team is working on React Native Desktop, which means that there's a bunch of features that are not in desktop, such as the browser and the wallet and the profile, that are now the responsibility of the wallet and browser to actually make happen. There's a reason we're investing into React Native Desktop, and that's basically to make a lot of use of code, reuse of code. So let's actually do that and not like re-implement everything. I'll also do a call with each team lead every week, or whatever cadence is preferable. And of course, that's open to anybody. So if you want to join in and you want to figure things out with me and the team lead, you're more than welcome to. Yep. So the other thing that we're implementing is like getting a much stronger understanding of the overall strategy and sort of roadmap of status. So we'll be using a program called OmniPlan. The main reason is because it's probably one of the best project management tools that I use at other businesses that I run. I realize it's not open source, and I realize it's going to be a little bit closed to start off with, but it does allow you to export HTML, so we can actually make these things public, like on every town hall. We can basically, and the idea is to essentially create accountability and measure time across everybody for everything that's happening in the organization. So you'll be able to see exactly who's working on what and for how long they've been working on it. This removes the burden of having to like worry about time in swarms. Instead, it puts it onto project managers, myself, and Nabil. So you can work with us and basically, like, we don't need to be too stringent with this. We just want to get like a sort of rough outline of what things, like guesstimates of, like, you know, manpower, difficulty, and low-hanging fruit, that sort of thing. But it also allows us to kind of get visibility into like what the plans are for like management, marketing, finance, you know, all of the core application, Nimbus, Embark, and that sort of thing. So this is something that's just starting now. I've kind of just added like all of the core developer feedback, but we haven't done any priorities yet. And so I've been working with each team to figure out what those priorities are, and we can actually start mapping this out. This should probably like take us out into the, you know, probably much further than 6 months, but probably to the end of 2019. Next slide, please. The other thing that that's kind of concerning is we haven't really documented anything for the last 6 months once we kind of like left the whole ideas thing. And so we have a little bit of amnesia that's happened in the organization. Also, it's a matter of consolidating knowledge. Like we've been terrible at that. Like whether it's we've used a wiki or not, it's always kind of like been a bit ad hoc. So we're not so bad at actually creating short-term memory. Like we use notes pretty well, we use chats pretty well, and we use discuss pretty well. But we need to start consolidating that into docs and into hopefully into swarms. One of the other problems that we have in this is it's not a really searchable knowledge base at the moment, so we need to figure that out. But again, I just want to emphasize that yes, it takes time, and yes, it is a burden, but like it's actually kind of worthwhile, because the more that we do this, the better we learn as an organization. The other thing that we want to talk about is like, we've been doing OKRs. They're great, like in terms of trying to give us some sort of measurable metrics, and they're certainly worth tracking. I think the problem with them is that we haven't had like a lot of clarity in terms of what we're actually trying to achieve. So that's what we're trying to figure out with me getting feedback from the developers and working on this OmniPlan stuff. So we'll have a lot more sort of clear-headed sort of targets of what we're actually trying to achieve. And then from there, we can actually overlay OKRs, keeping in mind the sustainability and white paper promises. The other thing that we need to do with OKRs is we actually need to measure them on a more frequent cadence. And we need to look into why then, why certain things are not being achieved, what are the blockers, and that sort of thing. So if we're going to do OKRs, we actually need to like enforce them. So that'll be another thing happening. I kind of sped through a lot of that. I'm sure there's a bunch of things that I actually meant to say but completely missed. But
I think that we're quite far into the town hall. Should we just continue, because there's some really awesome stuff coming up, and we can do Q&A at the end maybe.
Sure.
All right, cool. So let's move on to team updates. Carrie?
Yep, sure. So a warm welcome to one very new contributor, Stefan, and also Bruno and Alex, who just went full-time with us this week. I'm sure a few of you will have met them already sometime in the last few weeks when they were with us part-time. And on to the next slide, something we're experimenting with is doing kudos during these town hall. So I just wanted to give a shout out to JB from the Incubate team, and this is for helping with due diligence and interviewing a potential incubatee. Gino for doing a fantastic job organizing the first status meetup in Korea. Another shout out to SGH and HJ Lee for involvement in the Korean community, and Patrick for organizing the visit to Seoul. So those are from Hester. Yeah, special shout out and thanks to everyone.
Awesome. Guy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so we have to decide what's the best name for our hard wallet. So vote is open now. You can choose among more than 30 choices that were proposed by the community. So it's live. It's going until Wednesday midnight GMT time. As usual, you need some SNT on your wallet and some ETH to pay for gas. So please open your status app, go to the voting DApp, make the vote, or of course you can use your browser with MetaMask. For this, you should go to vote.status.im. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, we can move on to Embark. Yuri?
Hello there.
Hey.
All right. So yeah, I'm so excited to talk about Embark 4 finally. So I'll still try to keep it short. There's kind of more details at the DAFCON 4 talk and also in the recent blog post. And there will also be another release notes that contain a lot of features that were not formally announced yet. For example, recently we added support for ZK snarks and integrated that with the whole Embark workflow. But today I'll be talking about 3 highlights for Embark 4. So the recent updates, we released Embark 4 Alpha at DAppCon. It's more like a beta, but we call it the Alpha anyway. So we're taking this approach that there's a beta channel that some users they like to use that channel, and they give us feedback and report bugs. And we also introduced Cockpit, and that's a complementary web UI, which I'll talk more about it ahead. And we also did some changes to our dev workflow. So we added a build pipeline. So the Embark code can be transpiled using several tools, like namely Babel and TypeScript. So on that note, we did migrate the code base to TypeScript. We updated our development standards, especially in terms of commit messages, format, PR standards. And we were also trying to be a bit more open. So previously, we started like a private chat channel. We're trying to have now more like a public chat channel, release our meeting notes, and so on. And we also been helping more and more migrations to Embark, which have somewhat picked up steam in the last month, especially also since DAppCon. So up next, we're going to be releasing Embark 4 proper. We just like tidying it up, making sure everything is covered. And we also want to support Cockpit on the web, which is why that build pipeline is so it's so important to make Embark runnable on the web. And we also want to really update the website, especially the front page, to make a better job at communicating what Embark can actually do. So next slide. All right, so this is by far the most popular feature the Embark 4 is that, so previously we already logged the transaction. So when you make any transaction to a local smart contract in your development chain, it will display what is the method that was called. But now if that transaction failed, we'll show the exact line that it fails. It will also show the variable values. The screenshot somewhat outdated already. And then we can debug that transaction or any transaction that you wish. And then you have all the features that you'd expect from a debugger. You can step through it, watch a variable, see the value, etc. Next slide. All right. We also have this DApp generator. So the idea is that it can scaffold the entire DApp given a smart contract. And we also support that given certain parameters, it will actually scaffold the contract itself and the DApp. Our goal with this is really to make, ultimately, is to make, like we have this workshop, which is the detwitter. We want to make it possible to generate a detwitter with one command. That's the goal. So to make it as easy as possible, as fast as possible to prototype something. Next slide. And now about Cockpit. So Cockpit is a web UI that Embark 4 now launches. So it's kind of inspired by Jupyter notebooks, which is very popular in machine learning. So it's a web UI that it connects directly to the local Embark instance, and it has a very powerful dashboard. It has a deployment tool to deploy all the smart contracts to production in a safe and controllable manner. It has a full-featured blockchain explorer. It has an IDE, and it also has Ethereum utilities for developers. Next slide. All right, so this is a screenshot of Cockpit. So we have a dark and light theme. So you can see it's sort of like the equivalent that we have in the console, but on the web, but on steroids. So you can see all the services that Embark is running. You can see the contracts that were deployed, and you can see the logs, and then you can interact with Embark and it has a very powerful autocomplete that puts all the possibilities that you have with Embark and suggests commands on what you can do and type next. And you'll see also there's the deployment tab, there's the blockchain explorer. I cannot talk about all this in the interest of time. It will be basically the DAppCon talk. So I'll just go show the editor. So the next slide, please. So the editor, so all that you see, the files are the local DApp the developer is working on. So this is meant to be more like a complement to what the developer is doing. So you can still use Vim or whatever the developer wants to use. The advantages of this is that there's a lot of options here, like you can debug visually the contract, see all the values of the variables in each line. You can also interact directly with the contract. You can see the transaction history, can click one of the transactions to debug it directly. And you can also see a preview of your DApp directly in the browser. And that's it for now. I think it was short and sweet. So now about status.js. So this is something we've been. Can you just put next slide? All right. So this is something that it's myself, Richard Ramos, and Barry Guitar that I've been working on. So it's something we've been wanting to work on for a long time, but we're just too busy, especially with DAppCon. So we thought, okay, let's talk in Prague, and after DAppCon, we'll work on it and see what comes out of it. So after coming back from Prague, recovering from jet lag and all that, so around two and a half weeks ago, we started to work on the swarm. So originally the goals of the swarm were to make it easier to build alternative chat clients in JavaScript, and to also help spec out the protocols used. So the idea is that by building another library to interact with status and understanding what's happening under the hood, it will be easier for us to understand and basically spec out what's actually happening. And originally the milestones was essentially to make a library that you could talk to interact with status, and then some very, like a proof of concept client. I said original because we essentially already achieved all of this, all the milestones that we wanted. So next slide. So the updates really with this swarm is that, so we did a pure JavaScript library to interact with the status, which I'll show all of this ahead. We also did a command line client. We did a JavaScript desktop client, although the goal is to run it on the web. And also we working on a Whisper client in pure JavaScript. So next. Excuse me. All right. So first is the library. The goal is really to make it super that simple to build clients or applications that interact with the network. So it's not, it is not exclusive to chat. You could build tools with this. There's something not shown here, which is send JSON message, which can be quite useful. You can build bridges. Can build a lot of things with this. And so this is something that's working. This is working right now. And the first thing we did after this was to build a simple client. So can you put next slide? Which we call it StatusX. So it's kind of inspired by BitchX, which used to be a very popular IRC client, a command line client. We call it StatusX because I guess the B word would not be appropriate. And so this made sense in terms of iteration because it's in some ways it's less complicated than a UI client. And we also experiment with the protocol, so it can detect who's online. It can detect if someone is typing. This, of course, for compatible clients. So you put like the next screenshot. So you see, it uses Neoblast, which is what Embark uses for its own dashboard. So you can see there's a list of channels. There's a lot of things actually not shown here, like it shows who's typing. It can show who's online and not online. You have special commands to join channels, leave channels, switch channels, message directly people. If if there's a message you have not read yet, it will also display on the left the number of unread messages. And yeah, it does a bunch of stuff, and it was good to iterate before working on the desktop client. So next, so the other project is the desktop client. So here, again, the goal is to build alternative client with technologies that would leverage the JavaScript library we built. And above all, we want to build a client for ourselves that we feel that we can and want to use, and also to explore from a usability and work chat perspective. And this is very crucial, because the fact is there are trade-offs. So when it comes to work, people will use stuff like Slack or maybe Gitter, but when it's people want to talk to their friends, they're going to use something more like Telegram and WhatsApp, and that seems to be the current desktop client. That's the approach it's taking, besides also the very privacy focused approach. So we wanted to explore things from a different perspective, that is really from a more Slack-like perspective, that it's something we feel like teams can use. Although it's not necessarily something that, say, families would use, or because no family uses a Slack to talk to each other. And teams generally don't use Telegram to talk to each other either. And ultimately, we want to make all of this runnable on the web browser, and that sort of depends on the project I'll talk next. So I'll just show first the current desktop as it is right now. So it supports a lot of different things. So you can again see the list of users that are on the channel right now. You can see the ones that are live, I mean online, as well as the ones that are known to be offline. You can see again who's typing. It supports a lot of different things, such as if you put like a YouTube link, we'll put a preview. It supports emojis. You can put next. Wait, no, previous. Okay. Again, it also supports file uploads. It will upload to IPFS. So the first image that you see, that code, that's actually a file attachment, and it's using IPFS. It doesn't need an IPFS node, as it uses the libp2p to upload directly to IPFS. It supports widgets such as Spotify. It supports code formatting. I think in this chat someone's suggesting to put nim code. That will work too, and format the nim codes. And you have emoji selection. As for some other stuff I'm forgetting about. And now to see the next slide. So the other project we're working on is Murmur. So that's the name we end up choosing due to the lack of available names. And the goal again is to be a JavaScript Whisper client and node that can work in both Node.js and a browser. So we're very close to getting all of this working. It can connect and interact with the current network. It can receive the messages, decrypt, and so on. We almost got it working now for just encrypting the messages. And it can work as a JSON RPC server or directly in Node.js as a Web3 provider. So next steps is to get the mail server stuff working, integrate libp2p so we can make it work in the browser. And this would come bundled with the desktop client and StatusX to, so it won't need the Go Ethereum node. And yeah, so that's what, so again, it's not just me that's been, Barry and Richard have been working on this, and very crucial on all of this. That's it.
Awesome. That looks great. If any people want to get involved, what's the best way for them to get in touch? Is there a Slack channel that you guys, status channel you guys are using?
Yeah, just get in touch with any of us, the three of us, and we'll get you hooked.
Sweet. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Yuri. All right. Shifting gears, we have Sean giving us an update on Statusphere.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so Statusphere. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is Statusphere, or the Status Advocacy Program? So essentially what it is, we've been talking about it for some time, but it's a program that we've built in collaboration with some of our core community members. Essentially what it is, it's a program / platform that bring together our most engaged community members and provide them a means to contribute to Status, in less technical ways. And then also it gives them an ability to get involved in spreading the word about Status. So essentially through a series of curated tasks, or we like to call them community initiatives, it allows our community to go on a path to discovery about Status and our values. And ultimately, it's about identifying and inviting them to become ambassadors, future community ambassadors for Status. In terms of initiatives, whether it's engaging with people on the app, it's like there's a lot of comments about being able to welcome people as they join Status. That's definitely part of it. Being able to retweet blog posts, generating their own content, essentially all these small actions, being able to contribute in different ways towards Status. So why would our community want to join? So the first idea is around sharing your passion for Web3. So no, sorry, stay on the slide. So with our core set of values, which attracts people to our project, essentially we're allowing people to share their passion for Web3 technologies and its promise. So the intention of the program is to, as mentioned, take people on this journey of discovery around our project and the principles that underpin it. So there was this feedback that we got from one of our most engaged community members, and he was saying that, it took about 2 months for him to feel confident to be able to actually engage in any of our channels, just because there was so much information out there. So part of this idea is allowing people to kind of have, curate a journey where possible, but not limiting them. The other idea is around equipping people with the resources they need. So no matter their level of skill or knowledge, they feel like they're equipped to be able to share the newfound knowledge that aligns with their personal beliefs. The next piece is around showcasing their creativity. So, we need help in telling the story of why the decentralized web is a better, more open web. So providing people with the resources and tools, sparking creativity in our community to create content that showcases their passion for transparency, liberty, and decentralization amongst the other Status values. And the last is being recognized for contributing. So we have a really engaged community. And so part of this is, for some of these smaller tasks, they'll earn some S&T, and that part of that will allow people to, there's a leaderboard, and it'll allow people to go up the leaderboard. The purpose of that is to identify the most engaged community members, and we want as many people to become Status ambassadors as possible. So it's about inviting and inducting the next generation of community ambassadors, but also allowing the community to actually run the program itself. And then lastly on this point is, we want to not limit people in the way that they want to contribute. So part of this is people can contribute, people can put forward initiatives. Constantly they're reminded that, if they want to do something else that's not there, there's all these other means of being able to contribute. You can go to the next slide. So then the idea here is around empowering advocacy for the different community members. So whether your community, things like that might involve, creating content, being involved in our community competitions, doing things in the app, giving us feedback via surveys, being active participants in live streams. But then we also have ambassadors. So these ambassadors, they're not any different to community. Essentially, becoming a community ambassador just means that it's a signaling of your understanding of our core values and a bit about the project itself. So from there, you can be involved in more, involved ways. So being able to contribute to marketing plans, being able to run local communities yourselves, host meetups, moderate our social channels for us. Plenty of things to do. And the last piece is around content creators. So this is another area that we'll continue to explore, is how do we create a space where content creators, they won't need to rely on us to provide them a brief. A brief will be uploaded there, and we'll have the correct assets for them to be able to just make their own video or long form content. Go on to the next slide. So how do we enable our ambassadors to contribute? So there are a few key areas that we've identified. So the first one is toolkits. So providing them with, things like social media guidelines. If someone wants to create a Status Berlin channel, we should be giving them some guidelines or basic, things that can help them with being able to create that. If they want to host events on behalf of Status, if they want to represent Status at events, if they want to publish a ghost article, in all these instances, there could be toolkits or little, guidelines or resources that we could help them out with. Next is assets. If we want to create content, being able to give them the correct brand guidelines, fonts, logos, whatever it is, and slates if they want to create videos. FAQs, if we want people to actually help moderate and manage our communities, we need to be able to create some, essentially, some FAQ doc that everyone can be able to access. The next piece is presentations. So again, part of this idea of people being able to present Status, having a series of presentations. Feedback sessions, pretty self-explanatory, allowing our community to be able to give us feedback. And the last is training, providing any kind of upskilling for those community members so they can create better content. Next slide. So next steps. So please come help us develop more community or ambassador initiatives. The platform is now live. It's statusphere.status.im. Give us feedback on the program, on the platform. If you actually have ideas of either what the community could contribute with or ambassadors. So if there's a more involved initiative that you need help from the community on one of your projects, please put them forward. Please contribute with any resources for facilitating that community action. So if you do think of a toolkit or something that we can do to help facilitate that, please put it forward. Also want to call out that we did launch this platform on a subscription service that is not open source and decentralized. So we are currently in the process. We just wanted to get something out there to gauge community feedback, but we are actually currently in parallel exploring how we move towards a DApp and what that looks like. So if anyone has any thoughts, please feel free to come forward and help myself. Hutch, Eduardo, Jinho, these guys have all been crucial to this program. So yeah, exciting times.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. And next is a follow-up on how things went for cryptolife and DevCon from a social perspective. Chris?
Yep, Chris here talking from Sean. Would you mind going to the next slide, please?
Yep.
Cool. So first up is cryptolife as a whole. As expected, as this is the first time we've hosted an event like this ourselves, where almost all of the conversation is about status. We've set a new benchmark for ourselves in terms of engagement metrics with some super impressive numbers here. For reference, the green uplift figures you'll see on the slides are compared with our most recent event in Berlin, just to give some context. We had a ton of cool experiences set up all over the venue for community to interact with and create content with, which drove a lot of these numbers. Sentiment was overwhelmingly positive. We were seeing nothing but positive comments on Twitter, which was awesome to see. We even trended in Prague over the weekend, which was really cool. And even after the event and during DevCon, I was seeing a lot of people come up and refer to the venue as the cryptolife venue, chatting about everything we had going on, even post-hackathon, which I thought was really cool. Next slide, please. So this is the hackathon from an own channel's perspective rather than holistically. So at some events in the past, we've perhaps been guilty of over-tweeting a little bit, which has had an impact on our engagement. So the strategy here was very much fewer but higher quality pieces of content we tried to stick to where possible. We made a point to engage all our partner projects in our content mix and highlight a lot of UGC. My favorite thing on this slide is that, considering it was our own event, where you'd assume we'd be driving most of the hype and conversation ourselves, it was fantastic to see that our own channels made up less than 50% of the overall impressions figure, which shows a sizable contribution from our hackers and partners and shows they're really engaged. Next slide, please. And so this is DevCon, from our perspective, our own channels. Naturally, as DevCon wasn't our event, the total numbers weren't quite as high as the hackathon, but we still saw significant engagement across our tweets. And in fact, our most engaged with piece of content across both hackathon and DevCon was this fantastic tweet of Jared and Yessen dancing around during the moment we disabled Slack. Cool, that's it from me.
Cool. Awesome. I think that's it. There was meant to be a QA slide but there's no QA slide, so I'll just go back to the previous one. So that's all the presentations for today. We've got, I don't know, 7 or so minutes for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions or anything that's come up people want to discuss? Thanks, Chris and Sean, for the 2 presentations, by the way, and Yuri for the Embark stuff. It's super interesting to see.
Yeah, I got something, Corey here.
Cool.
Carrie has passed around a readiness document for Security Week so that you can kind of signal to us that you've gotten all the hardware required to go through the security training for Security Week / security training ongoing, etc. So we have a ways in which you can, the hardware you need to get and how you can get it. And then we need you to check off once you have it so that I can start moving forward with that. That's
awesome.
all I got. Yeah.
Great.
Hey, there was a question for Yuri from YouTube about whether there are any plans to reach outside the JavaScript ecosystem for chat clients and bridges with perhaps a native library. I'm not sure if he has anything to say about that. I think that JavaScript work is amazing in and of itself.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think Jared said yes to that.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, like the status sort of chat protocol is supposed to be open. We definitely have a lot of work to do in terms of making that happen. We're also doing like a lot of research into making a new next generation secure messaging protocol. So, I mean, the short answer is yes. Yeah.
Hey, in terms of curation, I mean, I'm totally on board that it's not a priority at the moment. That's we need to make sure that other aspects of the application and the ecosystem are fully functioning before it even becomes something like high priority. But I wonder perhaps, if you go back to that slide, Nabs, I think it's slide 3. Like the only thing.
So it's not a matter of priority. It's a matter of like who is going to do it, right? So we want to create, like we're creating a network. So we want to have other people in the network providing these things. So we can totally have someone else in the network doing curation using SNT, for example.
Sure. I mean, I'm totally with you. I just wanted to make 2 points that I thought would be worth consideration. Like the first, I'm not sure that, considering too deeply the liability that we might come up with through the app in the Play Store is a good way to think about what products we should build. And the second is that, like, here it says discovery is better. And, I'm also kind of with you on that, but I'm not sure what we would be doing at this point. It sort of goes into a twofold question, I suppose. Do you expect that by implementing proper protocol with API access and various different clients and stuff on top of it, that more DApps would be using Whisper and would be using other parts of the network by which we could do any kind of like useful discovery process? Or how do you see that playing out?
So, I mean, when I talk about discovery, I'm talking about like a gossip protocol and an elastic database, not dissimilar to, say, Dribbler's Dispersy. So the idea behind this is that you can essentially, you won't be exposed to certain kinds of content unless you've befriended people who are exposed to those kinds of content. So you can imagine like kind of like a amorphous database that's kind of flowing between people's social connections. And so in this case, like if you just open the application, you wouldn't see things like more nefarious or illicit substances or ways to procure them, for example. So what's really important about that is that we as an application are completely impartial to that content, which is why browsers are so useful, because they are impartial to the content. When we start explicitly making like decisions to put that up, it puts the decision onto us. And from people from traditional worlds, I mean, let's face it, like, yeah, we're working on next generation technology. also the better design is to be as general as possible. Like Ethereum is as general as possible. Ethereum isn't making very opinionated things on how to do things, and we should be a very clean window onto Ethereum to enable that. Something like Discovery enables that to happen. Something like a browser, or at least the ability to access these things through some kind of portal or window, is a way to make that happen. It means that we can create we can create like essentially a market of different ways of accessing content by doing that. And I think that's a much more sustainable way of doing it. And in fact, it's a way of, it's going back to Yuri's version of, Status X and Status.js desktop and like web versions of Status, It's about creating a network around Status where there's different ways of accessing that network, which is really important when it comes to things like app stores, because the reality is like we're trying to do mass adoption of Ethereum, right? And we're putting all of our eggs into one bucket when we're trying to get on like Apple App Store or on Google Play. And if we don't have those channels available to us for distribution, our ability to distribute becomes infinitesimally small. It becomes very, very difficult to do that, especially on mobile devices. Now, we may have some luck with desktop. In fact, the user acquisition cost for desktop is probably going to be a lot cheaper. And maybe we can do some side loading for Android. But if we can reduce the ability to or reasons for banning us for whatever reason, then more the better. Now, like the DApp store isn't just one of these problems. Like this problem exists, like also, say for example, the wallet. I don't want to get into that because it's already a can of worms. But doing financial transactions is going to compete with things like Apple Pay and Google Play and Samsung Pay or whatever they call it. And so then there may be some issues there as well. But let's cross those bridges and let's like try to reduce that as much as possible, while at the same time expanding the network as much as possible.
Sure. I mean, I think that's an absolutely fair answer, and it's not it's not something that I particularly want to push hard on more. But I do wonder, you're absolutely right that this is not going to be like a standalone issue in terms of thinking about things that might potentially close down good distribution channels for us, because one of the reasons that, for instance, I'm quite a big fan of the DApp store idea is that it uses an actual cryptoeconomic mechanism as a means of like enhancing, in this case, search on decentralized networks. I think that across use cases, this notion of being able to apply cryptoeconomics is obviously one of the things that's most interesting to do. It's one of the things that's genuinely new in what these technologies enable. So how do we balance that, that desire to push the bounds in terms of what's possible, especially cryptoeconomically, because that's where a lot of the interesting stuff is with.
So yeah, I mean, I totally hear you and I totally agree. I mean, that's why I work on Status, right? Like the whole idea that you can have sovereign identity and you can execute programs that literally in hostile environments allows you to create institutions that are corruption resistant and censorship resistant. It's absolutely phenomenal what we're actually enabling. Now, I want to stress very, very importantly, when it comes to curation and doing the DApp store, nothing changes. Like we can still do all of that. Like it's still going to happen exactly what you envision, Andy. It's going to be perfect. The only difference is it's not going to be part of the core application. That's the only difference. And we can still put resources onto it. We can still work on it, but we're doing it through a partner.
Cool. I mean, absolutely. I
want to be very crystal clear about that. We're not reducing, we're only expanding what's possible.
It's really really interesting. This is a great slide, and we should definitely make sure that this document that pulls important stuff from the white paper lives in many other places and not just Google.
Awesome. All right, any other questions? Otherwise, thanks to all the presenters, and good luck for the next 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
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 Enjoy the week.